Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Joshua. Hey,
Hey there, how are
good
you?
morning, good morning. How are you?
Really well. Under the circumstances, trying to keep our good spirits on a Good Friday.
Thank you for saying yes um, and helping us navigate these very tricky waters. um, and there's been a lot of discussion, as you know, and I saw the Values Partnership. Um, you guys were doing some work around engagement as well as education for the CARES Act, and so we want to hear your insight. A lot of the pastors on, again, they are part of networks, and so they'll be able to go back to their leaders and their networks and really help them navigate these very difficult times. And so I don't want to talk a whole lot. I really want to hear from you. But my very first question is, yesterday, we know that you spent time talking with President Obama. And he's technically still our president. And I kind of feel like you went to the mountaintop like Moses and heard from God. So we want to know, what does thus saith Obama? And then we'll let you talk. What does he have to say?
It was on his mind and heart to connect with a few of us, just to sort of encourage us heading into Easter. We used to do an Easter prayer breakfast at the White House, and so he would pull together friends of his to just come together in a time of prayer, either right before or after Easter. And obviously we're not able to do that this year, and so he just wanted to hop on the phone. And actually we just had a little bit of a time of prayer. Bishop Vashti McKenzie from the AME's church said a word over us, and a few others. And so it was just a good time to pray and encourage, and of course for him to encourage everybody to stay home and wash hands and all those sorts of things. And I should say at the outset, actually, Najuma, would you mind if we started with a word of prayer? Is that okay?
Absolutely, please. Please, yeah.
Y'all join me in prayer for a moment.
Thank you.
Lord, thank you for gathering us together through the wonders of technology to connect and lift up your name and come together on behalf of your people. I pray your blessings on everyone dialed in on Zoom right now or listening on Facebook Live. We know that this is a tough time for so many people, and I pray that you would come alongside their congregations, their organizations, their families, and themselves as well, Lord, that you would lead everyone who's dialed in beside still waters, even in this Easter weekend, so that their souls might be restored. We pray for the vulnerable, Lord, those who are going through it right now, that you would come alongside those who are brokenhearted, who have lost family members, people who are sick, that you would be a balm and a healer for them. And Lord, we pray for our national leaders, that they would be convicted to do the right thing, not the expedient thing, not the political thing, but the right thing in this time when so many people need help. We thank you in advance for what you're going to do, and we thank you for Easter and the resurrection. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that, Joshua. Thank you.
Of course. So I should say at the outset, this is a very informal call. I left government 7 years ago. We don't, although we sent out some information about the CARES Act, we don't have any current government contracts or any relationship with the SBA. We worked in separate spaces, as Reverend Najuma knows, helping to build promotional and marketing campaigns for films and television shows that have a social impact, working with foundations, helping them connect to the faith community. So none of our work is related to the SBA, government loans, government programs, et cetera. So this is more me sharing what I know personally just from this and from doing some research and from my prior work years ago in government, but there may be a number of questions I don't have answers to, and I don't have any role in these programs whatsoever. So it's just important to note at the outset. That said, I've been involved in some of these things in years past, and so hopefully some of this information will be helpful to you. And there are also a couple resources I can point you to. Most importantly, your local small business development center. There are not enough nonprofits and faith-based organizations that take advantage of local small business resources. You are eligible for many of them. business leaders often know to take advantage of those, but there's navigators at the local level, the local affiliates of SBA, and even at the city level as well, that can walk you through some of this too. And so would encourage you to follow up with some of them. Reverend Najuma, I'm happy to share some of the basic programs that are out there and how they might be relevant. But yeah, how did you want me to jump into this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted to hear both the resources, but I also wanted you, as one who is leading, connecting faith organizations and faith spaces with resources, wanted to hear your insight on what is available.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of confusion, right, about who should do what, how should things go. And so if you could help maybe unpack some of the confusion would be helpful. And then just your personal insights to what you see as it relates to faith spaces and your expertise in that area. And then we'll maybe open up for some questions.
Sure, absolutely. So I'd love to, so one, it goes without saying, just want to acknowledge what so many churches or so many of you all are going through and navigating right now. I was on the phone with the pastor yesterday who had 25 congregants who have COVID-19. My wife's family is in Chicago, which has been devastated by this virus, and we're trying to get my mother-in-law to us somehow, even with the restrictions on travel. And so I know that folks are going through it. My father's a pastor in Nashville, Tennessee, which has dealt with a number of cases, and they're coming straight off of a tornado that impacted that city. And so it's just a complex time. And I will say broadly, there's a lot of word here and there about churches that are staying open and threatening people's health. I am proud of the church right now. I think folks are adapting in some significant ways, bringing services online, figuring out streaming and conference calls, having to figure out how to move giving online for those that didn't have it already, and just trying to be there for folks while you yourselves are stressed in some ways too. And just want to acknowledge the work that faith-based leaders, pastors, and lay leaders are doing right now. It's just, we always hear the bad news, but I actually think this is a moment that the church can be really proud. And unfortunately, we're going to need y'all more than ever before because folks are going to be going through it for months. And so just want to acknowledge that. In terms of the resources that are out there now, there are two primary federal programs. And again, I have to just keep underscoring, I am not a formal expert in this stuff. I don't work for SBA, but what I am aware of are two primary federal programs and then some state resources. I've just done some research because I know most of you all are dialing in from California, and so did a bit of research around some of the California resources as well. But the two primary federal resources are really important to know and potentially very impactful. And very importantly, both of these have eligibility for faith-based organizations. And so for 501c3s, people that have your formal nonprofit status, as well as those congregations that may not have a 501c3, but your organization is such that you operate as a nonprofit. And so that's really important. The SBA just recently released a Q&A, a fact sheet, some guidelines that made it blindingly clear that for the two resources I'm going to talk about, faith-based organizations are eligible with a couple caveats. And so although everything you see is small business, small business, small business, faith-based groups are eligible for both of these federal programs. Nice. Now, the two primary programs that I am aware of, again, are the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
Wow.
So the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And they're two different but somewhat related programs. I'm going to start with the Paycheck Protection Program because the disaster loan program, as you would deduce, is a loan. It also, although technically it has, they've communicated that there's eligibility up to $10 million for that loan. what I'm hearing anecdotally from those who have applied and been approved quickly for this loan is that the amounts people are receiving, even if they have great need, are far less than that, like 1% of that. And so on the economic injury disaster loan front, the Paycheck Protection Program, on the other hand, people, at least anecdotally, are reporting receiving higher levels of resourcing, more money from that program. That does not mean you should not apply for the economic injury disaster loan. But I think it is still very much worth it to apply. But what I'm hearing anecdotally is that the amounts that are being conveyed through that program are lower than the other programs. So let's start with the Paycheck Protection Program. Reverend Najuma, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, real question. So I know you said even though these programs might present like for SBA, but nonprofits or churches should at least apply.
Not just at least, they are absolutely eligible.
Eligible. Okay, eligible.
100% eligible. 100%. Yeah, it's not a apply and see what happens kind of thing. Nonprofits and churches are 1,000% eligible for these programs.
Nice.
So for both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program.
Okay.
100% eligible. And so I'm going to get into some of the details of both of those programs now, starting with the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck, and I'm just pulling up some notes that I made for this call. Paycheck Protection Program, it was in the CARES Act, passed on March 27th, initially funded at $349 billion in forgivable loans to help small businesses, and I'm going to start saying, and churches and nonprofits stay afloat right now. So who qualifies for this are small businesses and nonprofits, including faith-based organizations and churches with 500 or fewer employees. They can apply for the loan. That includes, although in some ways that I'll describe in a moment, if you have a documented payroll, the loan amounts will be higher, but it also includes sole proprietors and independent contractors. Right. So again, 500 people or fewer, including sole proprietors and independent contractors. We're going to get into some details on this in just a moment in a more extensive Q&A about. Some of you may ask, well, we have less than 500 employees, of course, in our church, but if we're a part of a denomination or some sort of connectional entity, there's more employees in that there. For the most part, you're still going to be eligible, and I'll explain why in just a bit. There's only one loan per organization. The amount that you can get through this is it equals 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs for the previous calendar year. So 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost. So if you had $10,000 in payroll every single month, then you could receive up to $25,000 in a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program. That's up to $10 million for a maximum loan amount. There are a couple notes on that, and then we'll get to the forgivable nature of it in just a moment. That those payroll costs only apply to annual salaries up to $100,000. And so if there are employees in your organization that have annual salaries over $100,000, you can still apply for their payroll costs, but every amount of their salary over $100,000 has to be excluded from what you're applying, right? So so you have, let's say you have, I'm terrible at math, so let me see if I can do this.
Use simple numbers with zero.
Just one employee, and maybe that's yourself, but it's an annual salary of $120,000. So $10,000 a month. You'd be eligible to apply for 2.5 months of your payroll, which in that case would be $25,000. But you'd have to exclude the monthly amount that's over $100,000. So whatever that is, you exclude that. So it doesn't mean you don't put the people that make over $100,000 in your payroll. You just exclude that part of their salary. All right, so going over a couple more. So let me just, there's a lot more details here, but it's actually pretty straightforward though. I just want to, some of these pieces are important. So first off, you're eligible if you're a nonprofit, you're a church. Second, you have to be under 500 people on payroll, which the vast majority of folks obviously in the faith community will qualify for. Third, the amount that you apply for is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost. So take your monthly payroll, including yourself, multiply it by 2.5, and that's what you're applying for. Excluding amounts over $100,000 when calculating those costs. Mm-hmm. What you can use this money for is you continue to pay employees and cover other business expenses, including mortgage expenses and other kind of basic expenses, costs of benefits like medical insurance, healthcare benefits, retirement benefits, etc. You can use it for all of those things. In addition, this is another key piece. So when you're calculating the total amount you're applying for, and hold on, let me just pull up another note here. There are 4 things that you can add together. I mentioned payroll, but I want to add a couple more. It's your payroll for everybody, mm-hmm. health insurance for everybody, any retirement benefits that you pay, and payroll taxes, state and local payroll taxes.
Okay.
So again, you can get a loan that it covers your monthly, 2.5 times your monthly amount for everybody's payroll, health insurance, mm-hmm. retirement benefits, and payroll taxes.
Okay.
What you can't cover is any independent contractors. You can't get reimbursed for them.
Okay.
You also cannot get reimbursed for federal, I think it's FICA, the federal, unemployment taxes, and I think those are the key things that you cannot get reimbursed for, or get include in your loan amount.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about. I keep saying loan, but I also say I've used the word forgivable. So what do I mean by that? Because initially it is a loan at an extraordinarily low interest rate, a 1% fixed interest rate requiring no collateral and no guarantor, meaning you don't have to put anything down or up for the loan. Mm-hmm. The loans granted under this will be forgiven in full, essentially making them grants if you meet certain requirements. And the main requirement is you have to keep workers on your payroll for an 8-week period after the loan is granted. So what the government is trying to do is to have you continue to pay folks, including yourself. And so you have to show that you kept people on your payroll for 8 weeks after the loan is granted, and also that you used it for other costs listed. And so, for your mortgage payment, et cetera. And so there are some other details on that. And Reverend Najuma, I'll send you a kind of a FAQ that was helpful for me in terms of the repayment. But if you keep people on payroll, and if you use most, if not all of that money in the 8 weeks after you get it for those approved expenses, then they will forgive this loan, and it basically becomes a grant of 2.5 months of your expenses, which is a pretty important deal. Now, how do you apply for this? Do you go to the SBA directly and fill out an application and apply? No, unfortunately not. This is all through existing banks and other lenders. And it's helpful when you are applying through a bank that you have an existing relationship with. Now, I've very practically gone on different banks' websites and have a decent sense. It's a little bit of a mess out there trying to find somebody that will take your application right now, but it is in fact possible. The most straightforward way is if you have a small business or in your case, nonprofit banking relationship with a bank, call somebody there that you've worked with before and ask them how to get the application. Citibank, Bank of America was one among the first to take applications, and they're still taking them, thankfully. If you have a relationship with them, you can apply now. Wells Fargo opened up the applications, and then they promptly shut it down. So they reached a $10 billion limit in like 2 days, and now they're not taking any more loan applications until Congress funds this more. I've seen, we've had a banking relationship with like PayPal and so forth, one of their banking arms. And we also bank with Citibank. Citibank is taking applications, but you got to wait for them to call you. So they're basically calling through all the small businesses. So you got to kind of have to beat the bushes to find somebody to take this application. But
I think, Josh, but that's where the confusion and the challenge is coming for a lot of people is they're calling, because like Wells Fargo was one of our partners.
Yeah.
For a number of people that are on this call and that will watch the replay, Wells Fargo is one of our partners throughout some of our programming. And so people are calling and it's like, oh no. And so I think that's where the confusion. So thank you for clarifying that, that people, you just need to kind of beat the street.
I run a business. We have 15 employees. There's some uses that we may have for some of these funds. And again, it makes sense for everybody, no matter, everybody should apply for this. But I've had to just kind of call around both, for some of the work we're doing and also for other people that we know, just to sort of get this information. It is not readily apparent. So, we've checked Citibank for a week or so, and then they finally opened up the applications yesterday. And we're pretty plugged into this stuff, and it's still not easy. The most important thing is, I think the thing that I've seen to be most effective, for example, my wife has a good friend that is our local Citibank banker. And so she gave her, let her know when the application is coming online, et cetera. Reach out to somebody personally on the phone if you can, somebody that you work with, or reach out to the bank branch manager, whatever the case may be. And then there are a couple banks that you may be able to find that are taking applications even if you don't bank with them. That's relatively few and far between, but you do have to, it's not a go to one website and apply thing. If it seems like it's hard to find a way to apply, it's because it is, and a lot of people are having difficulty. You have to kind of beat the bushes to get this application in, but it's worth it. And it's worth it to get in line as early as possible, because this is real money that, not to cause any panic by any means. For example, Citibank said they'll certainly be taking applications all the way through June, but I would apply earlier rather than later, because it's going to take a while to process.
And so to all the pastors, especially those of you that are over networks, maybe there can be, and Frank, I'm just going to share, maybe there can be some coordinated effort around calling the banks, some of the smaller ones, and seeing, locally who's available, where the application might be available, so we can direct our pastors and nonprofits and small businesses there. So that might be, if there's someone on your team who can make those calls to some of these banks, that might be an effort, and maybe a collaborative effort that can be worked on. So thank you for clarifying, because I think that's where a lot of the confusion was. Yeah. People were going to SBA, not seeing nothing, and then calling their bank and not getting anywhere. And it's like, well, where is this available?
Yeah, and somebody has a member that works at one of these banks, or I would highly recommend organizing in the way that you just described, to say, hey, we got 15 churches here. We all want to apply. What's the best way for us to do that? Maybe even go in and talk to some. Well, you can't go in. Never mind. Don't do that. It's social distancing.
We can call.
Never mind. I'm used to going in and talking to people, but yeah, don't do that. But just reaching out to people personally. I want to go through a few other Q&As about this program, specifically as it relates to faith-based organizations.
Okay.
SBA just released some additional guidance on this. And I just want to underscore a couple things. So overall, again, just to hit the main points, 2.5 times your monthly payroll, health insurance, retirement, and there's one of the payroll, health insurance, retirement, and payroll taxes for state and local. That's what you can apply for. It's forgivable if you keep spending the money in approved ways, like salary benefits, housing, et cetera. And to answer the question that came in, yes, those are all approved expenses. And then you just kind of have to beat the bushes in order to apply. The application itself is not all that difficult. I can tell you what's on. It's some basic questions about your organization. They will ask you to supply either records from your payroll processor showing the amounts that you've paid out to these various in these various expense categories, or there's an IRS form that I think you file once a quarter that shows what you're paying employees, and so you can use that. Basically, they need evidence that you're actually paying the people that you're saying that you're paying. So let me go through some other Q&As that are about this program specifically for faith-based organizations. This also applies to the economic injury disaster loan that I'll talk about in just a bit. Actually, let me just hit that one real quick. So that's what I just described was a payroll protection program. The economic injury disaster loan program is a very similar set of application requirements. It's just a loan. Rather than something that's forgivable, it's a loan that for this one, you apply directly to the SBA. You can go on their website, download the loan form, and the last time I checked, their website was overloaded, so you can't actually submit it there, but you email it to them at the email address that's on the website. Reverend Najuma, you can probably get that and send it around to everyone, and I can help you there. And it is a loan program. I would apply for payroll protection first. If you get approved for the economic injury program, they deduct the amount you're approved from your payroll protection grant, from what I understand, or at least it impacts your application. And again, this is not legal advice. Talk to your own folks, but from what I understand, the payroll protection is generally going to be a lot higher. So get both of them in. It can't hurt to get them both in. But before you finalize your economic injury disaster loan program, get the payroll protection thing done first, and then move on to the economic injury disaster loan. I think it's it's a relatively low interest rate, somewhere between 4% and 6%, and it's amortized over 30 years, I believe, up to 30 years. It says loan amounts up to $10 million. What I have heard anecdotally is that they are capping loans far less than that, like at around $15,000, so much less than the millions and even the hundreds of thousands that you can get from the Paycheck Protection Program. Still may be meaningful. The other thing about the economic injury disaster loan, though, is that, and actually this is hugely important as well, even from what they've said, I haven't seen this work that fast in practice, but from what they said is, right after you apply for the program, they will give you a $10,000 advance on that loan, whether or not you're later approved. So while you're waiting to hear whether you're approved or not, which could take a long time, right, they've communicated that they will give you a $10,000 advance on that loan that you can keep even if you're not approved.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was another thing that was confusing, because people are like, well, what's up with the $10,000? And so thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
So that's not through the Paycheck Protection Program. It's through the economic injury disaster loan. You go to the SBA website, download the application form, get all your documents together, and then send it in. And note that you'd like the provision that will allow you to have $10,000 while you're waiting on approval. And from what they've said so far, and this is changing all the time, but from what they said so far, they will move that $10,000 faster than the overall loan itself. And even if you're not approved, you get to keep that $10,000 advance. So
and for a lot of churches, that might be, that could be enough, depending on the size of your congregation or your organization. That 10,000 really could float you a few churches for a couple of months.
To go a long way. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me. So that's basically the bottom line in the economic injury program. I'm going to go back to some faith-based specific provisions because these are important. So first off, are faith-based organizations eligible? SBA. This is a direct quote from them. Yes. And we clarify that they're eligible to receive SBA loans regardless of whether they provide secular social services. So that used to be a pretty clear dividing line, that the government will fund your secular stuff but not your religious stuff. The SBA is saying you are eligible whether or not you have sort of a nonprofit or a separate social service arm or whatever. You're just eligible, period. And I'm actually going to put this link in the chat. It's very helpful.
Make sure you get the link, guys.
So that walks through. Are there any limitations to how you can use the money? And it's only the same limitations that everybody else has. So there are no additional limitations based because you're a church. How will churches qualify if you don't have a tax exempt status through the IRS? Well, if you meet the requirement of Section 501c3, even if you don't formally have a 501c3, you're eligible. So like if you operate like a nonprofit and meet the requirements of Section 501c3, even if you don't formally have a 501c3 nonprofit status, SBA is saying that you're eligible.
Nice.
Will I have to sacrifice my autonomy or statutory rights if I request and receive a loan? SBA says no. It does not limit your religious authority or any other thing along those lines. You retain your independence and autonomy. What legal requirements will be imposed on my organization? And it's simply that you're receiving federal financial assistance and you have some basic requirements through that. Most specifically, you have certain non-discrimination obligations while you have the loan, meaning you cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, age, or national origin. You could look at some of that in the link I just sent. Mm-hmm. Is my faith-based organization disqualified because I'm affiliated with other faith-based organizations such as a local diocese? I might add a denomination, etc. And they say not necessarily. Basically, some folks may be like directly affiliated with other entities if you're super closely connected, like if your budget is coordinated by another party, or someone that has a really strong denominational or connectional affiliation. Most folks will not be limited on that basis. I think it's kind of a discretionary thing on the part of SBA, but I would still apply regardless. Do I need to apply for any religious exemptions? No, they said. And there's a couple other things there, but that's just sort of a Q&A about the application itself. While I'm doing this, I'm going to put in a link to the economic injury disaster loan application too. I can put that in the chat as well.
I appreciate it. And we have a couple of questions maybe we can answer, and that's in the chat. If that's okay with you, Josh.
Yep.
Okay. One of the questions, David Price, who works for the mayor's office, I think his question was really good. And there's some others that we'll get to as well. He says, it would be helpful if you could help demystify the engagement between government and faith-based organizations. What mindset should faith leaders have when approaching the SBA loan and these other programs? What should be the mindset, and help demystify that engagement that sometimes can be a little tenuous?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the main thing is do not be intimidated by these programs. It's going to require a little bit of navigating, in particular, a little bit of hunting down some forms and documents, etc. But it's worth it, and you are fully eligible. And you're supposed to be there. This is for you as well. This is not something that you are not a part of. They've been very clear. And honestly, as citizens who are doing tremendous work for our communities, as people who are active in the public square, it makes sense for the government to support you in terms of getting back on your feet and responding to ways that you may have been impacted by this crisis. And so this is for you. This is not, you are not on the outside of this. You are inside of this response that the government is moving forward. Now, what it will require in practice. So once you I would get in the headspace of, we're going to go get this money. We're going to, for our people, for the purpose of sustainability of our organization. Once you've decided that, okay, I'm going to do my best to get this done, then you got to go through a little bit of rigmarole. Most importantly, just get your paperwork together. Your payroll forms, a few IRS forms, having your tax returns would be helpful for those that have them, and anything else that may be required. But just check those boxes and get it in, and then continue to follow up until you've gotten the answer.
I like that. I like how you say, get in the headspace. I'm gonna get this money. I think that's part of it, is like not being intimidated by process. Mm-hmm. Not being intimidated by language that's being used in the media. And also, even though a lot of people are not explicitly saying the church, but knowing that we belong here. And I really like that you said that we all belong here. So all of you, especially those of you that have networks that you work with, go back and tell them, we belong here. This is money for us as anybody else, and go get it, especially, to make sure that our people are covered, your staff are covered. And don't let, the energy out there keep us from it, because it's for us. So I really appreciate that, Joshua. A couple other questions, and you addressed this a little bit. Are the loans forgivable? And so I just want to make clear, the loan, once you're funded, is not forgivable.
Well, so remember, two programs: Paycheck Protection Program, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. PPP EIDL. I know it's a lot of acronyms. Paycheck Protection Program is forgivable.
Yes.
That's the one where it's 2.5 times your monthly payroll and other expenses. If you keep paying people for 8 weeks after you get that money, it turns into a grant. You never have to pay it back.
Nice.
That one's completely forgivable. Economic injury disaster loan is a loan that it does not turn into a grant. It is a loan, but it's a low interest loan, but it's not forgivable. With one exception, that is they give you, in theory, I haven't seen it a whole lot, but in theory, they give you a $10,000 advance on that loan. And if you don't get the loan, they say you can keep that $10,000. That's what the initial policy was. I haven't seen that change, but they say you can keep that $10,000. If you do get the loan, then you don't. Then it's that $10,000 is a loan. It's not a grant. You still got to pay that back. Let me quickly touch on a couple California things that I heard about. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I know most folks are in Southern California, Los Angeles County, and our friends from the mayor's office will probably have much more detail than I. But here are a few things that I've heard about, and you will need to do more research here, but it's worth it. So San Francisco County has a small business resiliency program. Businesses with 1 to 5 employees and can get up to $10,000 for salaries and rent if they demonstrate a loss that they've gone through. That's San Francisco. You can share it with friends in the Bay, but you need to check and confirm that nonprofits and faith-based groups are eligible. But it's called the San Francisco Small Business Resiliency Program, and I'm going to put this list in the chat too. State resources.
Okay, because we're in the chat.
Yeah. Los Angeles County has the Los Angeles Small Business Emergency Micro Loan Program. Businesses located in LA that have been impacted can apply for low interest loans between $5,000 and $20,000, repayment between 6 months and 5 years, interest rates as low as 0% for 6-month terms. I don't know if faith-based and nonprofits are eligible for that. Someone else may know, but I'm going to do LA County in the chat here.
Okay. Thank you.
And then California iBank is offering 90% guarantees on loans up to $1 million for small businesses in declared disaster areas. Then there's a couple specifically for Sacramento, South County, and that's it. So that's the one. They're all at that first link I sent, the Zenefits link. Those are all listed there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you for that, Joshua. So Pastor Sonia Dawson had a question. The PPP doesn't require the church or a nonprofit to seek forgiveness at the end of the 8 weeks. So do we have to seek it, or is it automatic?
Yeah, I believe you have to actually proactively apply for it to be forgiven. Let me just confirm that real quick, because I do have a note on that.
Okay.
1 second.
And for everyone that's on, and for those that will come back on, this is being recorded. So whatever is, none of it will get lost, and it'll be put into one video. So you'll have the resource. Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second.
Thank you, everybody, for coming back on.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Jasmine, we have the corporate version. It's just Zoom is getting hacked. They actually had an article about that Zoom is getting hacked. So that's how you know you're doing something right. You're worthy of hacking. You're hackable. But yeah, thank you.
Give me
no problem. And if you saw somebody was on that you don't see them on, you can text them and tell them.
You have to submit a request to the lender that is servicing your loan. And so remember, it goes through a lender, and the request will include documents that verify the number of full-time employees and pay rates, as well as payments on your mortgage, lease, and utility expenses. You have to certify that those documents are true and that you used the forgiveness amount to maintain your head count of employees. And then they have to make a decision on that request within 60 days of your request. So the answer is your lender that eventually gives you the loan, hopefully, will have a form that you need to fill out to request forgiveness. It does not happen automatically.
At the end of the 8 weeks for everyone.
At the end of the 8 weeks, correct.
Yeah. And then 8 weeks, yeah, probably that.
Yeah.
You want to be proactive
Mm-hmm.
And I really thank you, Joshua, for sharing about those two programs. So remember, it's PPP and
Yep.
the EID.
EID. Yep.
Yeah, and the headspace, and I really like you saying that, is that we belong here and we should take advantage of these resources.
That's exactly right.
And not feel no kind of way about that.
And there's just one other small thing. A lot of mortgage lenders and other folks, especially on the mortgage side, some states, they have to do forbearance with no impact on credit. Some states are doing it, some lenders are doing it just in a discretionary way, but call all of your sources of credit, almost all of them are having some pretty liberal provisions, providing forbearance for 3 months, postponing payments, et cetera. And so I know a number of pastors that are specifically not having to pay their mortgage for 3 months right now. And so just call the lender or go to their website to request whatever relevant form there. But I think that's another really important thing. And honestly, it's worth a call to any reoccurring source of payment that you have, just to see what their provisions are. Now, if you can continue to pay and it's not a problem, then great. I think, continue to do so. But if you're having to make some tough decisions about what things you're paying and what things you're not, start with those sources where you can get a formal forbearance with no crazy fees and late fees, et cetera. Most mortgage lenders, for example, are suspending late fees and payments for 3 months right now, and it's worth it to call and check.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we're coming up on an hour, which is interesting because that time goes by quick. And I really appreciate you, Joshua, for kind of just making this, kind of easy to grasp and explain. And of course, we'll make the recording, anything shared, the chat is being saved. So know that we have two technical people kind of managing the back end for this call. And then, of course, it'll be made available on Facebook Live. But we wanted to give you all that are on opportunity to talk to Joshua and ask him a couple of questions. So let's say we'll spend about 10 or 15 minutes on Q&A. And then,
I've got it till 1:30, so I'm good. I got to just put these kids down.
You got some time? Okay. Okay, because I know you're busy. And
daddy daycare day today, so sorry about that. But yeah, I got about 5 to 10 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so ask a couple of questions and then. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, wait. Time is different for me. So what time is it your time, Joshua?
Oh, it's 1:24 now, so I got about 6 to 10. I can go for about 5 more extra minutes.
So let's say 2 questions.
Okay. Two questions. Yeah.
2 questions. If you got a question, just raise your hand or something so I can unmute you. Okay, Crystal Moselle, go ahead.
My question was for the churches. One of the concerns that I've heard across the country, Bishop is the bishop over MIFB, Macedonia International Bible Fellowship, and the forbearance is great. But the thing is, if it's going to be due in 3 months, I still do not have the money to pay for it. Has anyone heard of, or have you heard of, a program that's doing more than just a forbearance that is either possibly a modification or something of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it varies widely by lender, so this by no means is a national or even a statewide policy. It varies by every single lender. That said, what I have seen most frequently is folks offering to initially forbear, and then what they want you to do at the end of that period is apply for a modification that then, rather than having all 3 months due at the end of that period, just tax on those payments at the end of your loan term. So, 20, 30 years, whatever that loan term may be. Just anecdotally, the lenders that folks that I know that have gotten forbearance, it's basically a 2-step process. They don't want to give you that up front. They don't want to say that's going to happen up front, but you get your forbearance first, and then they're asking you to apply for a modification. Now, hopefully they're being very liberal with those modifications. It appears that it's all a part of the same program, but it is kind of a 2-step thing: forbearance and then leading to a modification. I know one example of someone who got a modification that built into the end of their forbearance period, but you do have to do them separately from what I understand. Again, that's anecdotal. It may be different by lender.
Thank you, Crystal. And then Jaslyn, real quick.
Yes, I have another question really quickly, because you were saying that in the PCP program that the independent contractors weren't covered. But when I was looking, and I'm reading from that application, it says the applicant was in operation on February 15th, 2020, and has employees for whom it pays salaries and payroll taxes or paid independent contractors as reported on Form 1099 miscellaneous. And I asked that question because like our musicians, our cleaning people, they're all 1099 employees to whom we do pay a salary to. So I'm a little confused as to if we can include those salaries or not include them.
Yeah, so I can send you the provision that I've seen and read, and again, you'll have to look into some of this for yourself. The reason why that they're not covered from all that I've seen is because they can apply for something for themselves, and so that there's a separate independent contractor 1099 application period that for a lot of lenders is opening up after this main period, and I'll send you.
Because most of our independent contractors, they don't work for anyone else. Like our musicians aren't musicians, anyone else. They don't have EIN numbers. They typically use their social. So that's why I didn't know how that will work.
And so again, somewhat anecdotal, in my own conversations with both Citibank and then PayPal's Loan Builder, another lender that we use, they made it very clear to me. So about half of our employees are pretty full-time, almost full-time independent contractors. They made it very clear that I could not apply for them, and the SBA seems to indicate that on their provisions because and I think it would make more sense for me to be able to apply for them. There's a couple folks that 80% of their work is with me, right? And I'm paying they're not a W-2 employee, but I'm paying the vast majority of their income every year, and so I would have really preferred to add them to that payroll list, but I was told that I could not, and so that's what that is what I was told, and I'm just trying to get you a couple links here that I can put in the chat. But yeah, you should. Continue to look for if you can. If you can, when you talk with your lender, and I think that's the conversation to have. And if they allow you to, then I think that would be great. Here's another one: independent contractors are not considered payroll. Here's a Q&A.
And what we may do after this call, not may do, but what we're going to do, Jaslyn, and for everyone, we're definitely going to share the call of this Zoom session. And we're definitely going to kind of debrief and see how can we coordinate together to make sure that information is getting to everybody and is shared, and also just coordinate this. This is an opportunity for us to work together again as alumni and partners to seek out the right information. We've got kind of the framework, and thank you, Joshua, for that. But we're going to coordinate our efforts and work together to find out who's lending, who has applications open, who's doing what. So if you call, we can say, go here. If someone else calls, we can say, go there. So we're going to, that was the point of this call, was to begin to coordinate our efforts together and not working in different silos, because that always is a burden.
Yeah.
But if we coordinate our information. Go ahead, Joshua.
And I put in the note, and again, I hope they change this, and I would love to be incorrect here, but this, just from what I just said, in its April 2nd interim final rule, the Small Business Administration noted that independent contractor cost does not count towards the payroll costs of the company. For the purposes of PPP, independent contractors must file individually. So that's what they're saying here, but yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to do that. So I know you have to go, Joshua, because it's 1:30 your time. So we just want to hear your heart maybe for a minute.
Yeah, well, again, just kind of where I started.
We know that you're also a man of God, so whatever's on your heart.
Yeah, well, first off, I think this is, I'd always hear about, I spent a lot of time with some folks that were very active in the civil rights movement. I just lost one of my dearest mentors and friends, Reverend Joseph Lowry. We're Zooming in via Zoom call to his funeral last weekend. And he would sort of tell me about the collective spirit in the late 50s and 60s when he was most active in the movement. Certainly heard the stories from my family about World War II and sort of the sense of solidarity in these moments. we haven't had a time quite like that. We had 9/11 that impacted people differently. It's, more New York based. This has been one of those times where we are all going through some stuff in a major way at the same time. And it's challenging. I'm sure you all are just like me, trying to think about how to keep your family healthy and well. My wife is 9 months pregnant with our third baby, and we're having to drastically change labor and delivery plans now, and all sorts of things like that. But at the same time, there is, and I want to be careful here, because there's a lot of pain right now. There's a lot of heartbreak. There are a lot of people who have lost their lives, and we're praying for them. We're seeking to support them wherever we can. There's also something really special that I think is happening, where we're walking through something together, where we are reminding ourselves of what our common values are as a community, where we're fighting for each other, checking in with each other in new ways, doing things like this, right? So, where we're connecting and learning from each other. And so I pray that you would find those spots to make this a flourishing time, even in the midst of the challenge, that this would be a time that is a fresh start, a reset, and that somehow in the context of all of this, something beautiful will grow. And that would be my prayer for you all and for everybody that you're connected to. Thank you for what you're doing. I know that this is a tough time for many churches and organizations. You don't get enough credit, but I just want you to know I see you. Certainly our former president, as Reverend Najuma said, had a chance to speak with yesterday, sees you, and I deeply appreciate you as well. So that's that.
Yeah, and let me just ask this last question. How can we help you, Joshua, with Values Partnership? Is there anything that you need from us?
Is there any service that people are aware of where I can FedEx a toddler to somebody? Because I'm happy.
Got two of them. But you got to keep your kids.
No, yeah, well, I appreciate that. Just continue to pray for me and pray for us. My wife's name is Michelle, so if you think about it, feel free to say a prayer for her health and our new baby's health. We're trusting God for a beautiful labor and delivery process. She's due May 11th, and we know that he's going to show up, and it's going to be even better than I imagined. But if you think about it, feel free to remember her in your times of prayer.
Absolutely, we will do that. Thank you, Joshua.
Right.
Thank you, everybody, for being on. Thank you for those that are able to come back.
Feel free, Reverend Najuma, if you want me to do a follow-up in a few weeks or whatever, I'm happy to. So just keep me posted.
We will do that. We will do that. Thank you all so very much. Blessings to everyone. May your Good Friday be blessed, and may your Resurrection Sunday be even more blessed. We love you. We appreciate you. This will be edited, put together, made available. We have a resource folder, and then we're going to figure out how to coordinate our efforts to work together, and so that everybody can take advantage as much as possible of these resources. So thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Have a blessed day. God bless you.